Delighted to see that there's interest in Alcoholics Anonymous, the portion called the 12 Traditions. My God, it's so good to see that there is that interest. It really is quite inspiring to myself. How about we'll go ahead and pass these around. What this is the schedule. There has been a change already, yes. So we've got close to it, but there was a Wednesday switched around due to a schedule conflict. So you want to get that. If you have a prior one, I think it's the one in October, switched around. So please make sure you have that information. And then also, I guess when we're done doing that, what we do is, I guess we'll go ahead and get to that portion later. There's will be a syllabus, and if you miss, you will get it the following week. In other words, obviously this book that we're going to be studying is in depth, and we pick and choose articles that have to do with that tradition. So this first week, obviously, we'll give the page numbers where we're talking or where we're reading and so on and so forth, and each week it'll keep expanding. So if you miss a week, if you miss two, when you come back at week 3, we'll have that, and it's a progressive thing. So we'll go ahead and do that. We ready to pass that out? That's perfect. Okay, we can go ahead and get that out of the way. Speaking of niceties, Bob, thank you so much. I tell you what, willing to go to any length. I had another senior moment. What I mean by that is Bob asked me a year or 2 years ago, hey, when you do this, let me know. And I said, don't worry about that, Bob. I will do that. I called Bob yesterday at about 12:10 and said, hey, Bob, guess what? And he is here, so kudos for Bob all the way from Coshocton to come up here. And he's recording this, so please see him if you would be interested in this and to get out what we're going to be covering on here. It's an amazing thing. What's up, boss? How's it going? I'm living a dream. How about you? So thank you, Bob, for doing that. And then also, we had the book of study that we are going to be having or using is The Language of the Heart. We had some back there. I think they are all sold. Tony is taking care of that. I think the hardbacks were 15, the large print were 16, and the softback were 14. Are we all out? And we got some that are we're making payments, so I'll let you guys do that. Yeah, because you better watch it. We'll end up being a day late and $1 short on that. You know what happens with that. So, and then also, Tony, we honored the 7th tradition because St. Paul's is gracious enough to allow us here, but we need to make our donation to them. And then Kenny and Tony are going to be setting up as well, so we will be having coffee. And how we got here tonight, it's really kind of a strange story, as I think it was 3 years ago, somebody asked me, would you be willing to do the traditions out of this book? And I said, yes, I would. Always up for a challenge. And what I mean by that is it raised the bar for me to be able to get in and do what we're able to do. And he said, I would like the guys that I sponsor to be there. And I said, yes, I will. And we met at St. Thomas. And it was for the guys that he sponsored, and we got through the first year with a pretty good attendance, recidivism, not like the penitentiary when we make you come back here. That's a good kind, not the other kind. But anyhow, the following year, I said, all right, Jack, how about if we just open it up for everybody, sent a flyer, and lo and behold, the place was bigger, and we had a lot more ladies than we did the time before. Oddly enough, this year, none of those guys and how it started right in here, but thanks, God. Thank God for giving us the willingness to do here. And anyhow, we ended up in this beautiful facility, and there's a little bit of history of a lot of us here coming to St. Paul's, and they are just so gracious to us. So they ask us to stay in this area. Restrooms are over there, drinking fountain, and please respect the non-smoking thing. I mean, out the door in the butt receptacle, and we certainly want to honor that because we're going to be turning around back here in January doing another thing, and that's a different story for a different day. So, as we like to start a lot of things, and I always like to start this way, because of God's grace and because I'm a member of the fellowship called Alcoholics Anonymous, I found a couple textbooks, and this would be one of them. Because of God's grace, the 12 steps. Today, God's graced me with 11,016 days, which is 30 years, 1 month, and 26 days. And really blows my mind away. And we would like to go to the quiet place. We always try to still ourselves. And what I mean by that, it's a busy, hectic day. If we can go to that quiet place before we pray the serenity prayer from our heart instead of saying it from our head, and invite God to come into our minds, our hearts, and our souls to receive what he's going to give us tonight if we could. God, grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, the courage to change the things we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. Bill wrote this, and he coined it the language of the heart. It actually comes from another conference-approved book, AA, and it goes as this. Why at this particular point in history has God chosen to communicate his healing grace to so many of us? Every aspect of this global unfoldment can be related to a single crucial word. The word is communication. Can you hear back there? Are we doing good? Okay, I didn't think we'd have a problem with that, but anyhow, that's how my mind works 5 minutes later, anyhow. From the beginning, communication. There has been a life-saving communication among ourselves, with the world around us, and with God. From the beginning, communication in AA has been no ordinary transmission of helpful ideas and attitudes. Because of our kinship in suffering, and because of our common means of deliverance, are effective for ourselves only when constantly carried to others. Our channels of contact have always been charged with the language of the heart. And I'll be darned, that's the name of the book that we're going to be studying. So we are going to be talking about the 12 traditions. And I was listening to a talk by Bill Wilson one time, and he was talking about somebody came into New York and was doing something or another, and he was getting ready to do this big traditions thing, and he had to talk to Bill, the master of this thing, and the architect, and Google and Goggle, and anyhow, they had about an hour conversation. So the guy was ready to go, and he said, Bill, what is the last thing that you want to tell me about this traditions workshop or whatever he's going to do? Bill looked at him, and his deadpan way, he had 2 words: good luck. So that's what we're going to need that. So yeah, now, good luck. But you know as well as I do, whenever I say the word good, you take one O, and it's God. So if you ever hear me say it's all good, it's really, that's a PC way of saying it's all God, so we don't offend the others. So it's all God, and that's what we're going to be talking about. So I like to start with a couple things. We're going to try to have a little bit of fun. We were talking about this earlier, that the subject matter could be dry to some, but it's absolutely fascinating to others. And what I'm saying is, in preparation for this week, got it unfolded in a way that it never did in the years prior to it. And it's absolutely fascinating, and it's not the slender threads, it's the invisible threads that we are here tonight. And there is no doubt in my mind that obviously God's pulled the strings on this thing, and he's still pulling it. However, he expects us to do our part on that. So I would like to read a couple things, humorous in nature, and we will go ahead and get started. I guess this is called How It Works. And by the way, this also has been commonly known as Why It Works. Uh-oh, running out of room. That's what we've coined that, and obviously language is hard. But anyhow, it goes like this. Rarely have we seen a group fail who has thoroughly followed AA's traditions. Those who do not follow them are groups who cannot or will not accept these simple principles. Usually groups that are constitutionally incapable of being humble. There are such unfortunate groups. They are not at fault. They seem to have been developed that way. They are naturally incapable of grasping and developing a manner of functioning which demands practicing group humility. Their chances of surviving are less than average. There are those, too, who suffer from affiliation, guruitis, but many of them do survive if they are willing to refrain from these activities. It's kind of funny, but in a way it's serious. And here's another one, too. Our group meetings disclose in a general way how we handle our affairs, remain in unity, and seek to carry AA's message. If a group decides it wants recovery, unity, and service to be its experience, and is willing to practice humility to get them, it is then ready to adopt certain principles. At some of these we balked. We thought we could find an easier, more effective way, but we could not. With all the earnestness at our command, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. Some of us have tried to hold on to money, power, and prestige, and the result was chaos until we practiced the traditions in all of our group life. Remember that we deal with alcoholics seeking to direct rather than to be guided, affiliate than rather to cooperate, to accumulate rather than to pass it on. Without help, unity is beyond our reach. But there is one who has all power, that one is God. May you find him in your group conscious now. Warping the traditions availed us nothing. We began to see the becoming of our destruction. We asked his guidance towards unity with honest humility. Many of us exclaim, those don't apply in this situation. Do not be unique. No group has had the misfortune of curing all alcoholics or other people with other problems. We are not magicians. The traditions are not as old-fashioned as they seem. The point is, they guide us on how to be of service to fellow sufferers. The principles set down are guides to group progress. Better to be service to some than no use to all. We hope to see our group progress. That's why we have group inventories, not to become a model for AA as a whole. The traditions as written, the experience that developed them, and the chaos resulting from their avoidance or misuse make clear three pertinent ideas. A, that a group unguided could destroy everyone's chance of recovery. B, that probably no amount of human power could get alcoholics to make my solution work for the group outright. And C, that God, and you notice another word that we will get, and it is a requirement for sobriety. We'll try not to talk about that other book, the big book, but by the way, that is one of the requirements in there, and go to Bill's story to see that. I won't tell you what page it is, and come back in January. He says that is a requirement. And we will find out that that's what these traditions will give us. They will give us that state of humility, and humility is a place of where cut down to the right size with myself, cut down to the right size with my fellow man, and most importantly, cut down to the right size with God. And it is something that Bill knew about. He knew about the alcoholic ego. He was able to give us what we have. Dr. Bob, the other co-founder, he came naturally, if you will, if there is such a thing, for the humility thing, and it's amazing to see the difference between those two. So it's absolutely fascinating, and you'll see how in Bill's penmanship, a style, and it's absolutely fascinating to look at how he does and why he does and the point that he gets across. So a lot of the things that we're going to talk about real quick, most of these are quotes from Bill himself, and he said, AA is a communion of sinners, not saints. He said, we are brothers in, not brothers in virtue, but brothers in defects. Personal opinion, I believe Bill wrote the 12 traditions, or the 12 steps to prevent suicide. He wrote the 12 traditions to prevent homicide. And if you don't know what that means, then you need to get in the home group or start doing service work. Bill said, the 12 traditions work not because we're better people, but because we're weaker people. He had such a gift of knowing how flawed we were. Bill knew that Alcoholics Anonymous, the program, the steps, the book, was perfect. The fellowship was a close second, but it had one major flaw. It was full of alcoholics, and therefore he wrote about the 12 traditions. He called these designed for survival. He uses some pretty powerful words about survival, matter of life and death. I mean, he did not mince the words. And when we go through these, I will hopefully remember to point out the dates, but he wrote some of this, or most of it, a lot of it, back 46, 47. And if you put your hand over that date, you would have sworn he wrote it in 2016, 2017, because it is timeless. And that's what I found out about this book and really the stuff that Bill wrote. It is timeless like all spiritual, all great, let me clarify that, all great spiritual literature that is written. And I guarantee you, you will find and you will agree that what he wrote is timeless. So, anyhow, Bill joked about it and said, too, the traditions even made AA safe from himself. And he was good at making fun of himself. And obviously, Bill said, implicit through the 12 traditions is confession that our fellowship has its sins. We admit that we have character defects as a society, and these defects threaten us continually. It's absolutely fascinating. And we're going to try to go to a novel concept in Alcoholics Anonymous. Go from the I, me, and my to the we, us, and ours. It's a language that is not spoken a lot in a lot of Alcoholics Anonymous arenas. I'm being PC, I'm being nice. It's that language of I, me, and my is dangerous to what we are talking about, and you will see that he certainly does not have one of those in there. AA's 12 traditions are a set of spiritual principles and like the 12 steps. And I'm going to go ahead and read what Bill wrote and quote him. He called them the 12 points of tradition are little else than a specific application of the spirit of the 12 steps of recovery to our group life and to our relations with society in general. This is what blew my mind in preparing for tonight. Bill talked about these traditions first as relations at 3 levels, and we're going to read it tonight. 3 levels, and it's a lost art from my experience in Alcoholics Anonymous. And he changed it from these, he said, from relations to experience. And experience is a big word. Experience is history. It's undebatable. It is what it is. It happened. It's unchangeable. It's not a philosophy. It's not a theory. It's not an idea. It's history. And that's what we're reading about is history. And obviously, they're not here to change history or rewrite or anything like that. It's already been done for us. In other words, these traditions came out of experience. Experience is, it's happened. What is the fellowship? We share our experience. It's our history. It is what it is. Absolutely fascinating. And also, the value that I've gotten from this is to see how the 12 steps and 12 traditions is required for what I call the real deal. When he talks about these different types of unity, and obviously I left the words blank on there, but the 12 steps and 12 traditions individually is required for what I call emotional or the real deal of recovery, not sobriety. 2 different words. Come back in January, we'll talk about that. But anyhow, he goes on to say, the recovery steps would make each of us individual AA whole with one another. The 12 points of tradition would make us one with each other and whole with the world about us. Unity is our aim. Our AA 12 traditions are, we trust, securely anchored in those wise precepts: charity, gratitude, and humility. Nor have we forgotten prudence. So obviously, Bill said in 1947, our whole AA program is securely founded on the principle of humility. That is to say, perspective that we relate ourselves rightly to God and our fellows. And Bill warned us, obviously, and we will talk about it tonight, success of AA, it could be a heady wine and a serious problem. And he reminds us about success, or humility before success, and unity before fame. And we find out tonight, he says, if we maintain our humility, so our unity. Cannot have this without that. As we know, most things in Alcoholics Anonymous are a byproduct. In other words, having had a spiritual awakening as the result. That comes after, never ever before. If I'm looking for something in Alcoholics Anonymous, if I'm looking for peace, if I'm looking for joy, if I'm looking for her, if I'm looking for the motorcycle, if I'm looking for the job, whatever it is, it will always elude me. Things come as a byproduct thereafter. And this is what we're finding in the 12 traditions. It's the same thing. Unity comes after humility, not before. Don't shoot the messenger. By the way, I'm just delivering the mail. I'm a mailman. I don't deliver the mail by hitting you with the mailbox. That's not what we're here for, because obviously that don't work, and that's not what this is about. This is our history, giving the information and do as you see fit as you need to do. So anyhow, Bill reminds us, we are people who could not exist at all except for the grace of God. He always brings it back to God. Always brings it back to God. I mean, it is so cool. It is so cool. Anyhow, he said, quote, the 12 steps and the 12 traditions, mainly these were principles designed for ego reduction. And obviously the 12 traditions take us from anonymity to humility and all in between. And I'll go ahead and say this now. We find that we are like grains of sand on the great beach of life. Without the beach, we could not exist, but without us, the beach couldn't exist either. Fascinating, absolutely fascinating to look at that as we go through this thing called the 12 traditions. So, we will go ahead and start, and I always like to read something, and for maybe some people that are not familiar with it, we have what's called the 12 traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous. We have them the short form, and we have the 12 tradition long form. Real quick history about the short form. They were written by Earl Treat. His story's in the big book, sold himself short, started AA in Chicago. They pared these down, as you can see here, the long form, to one page to 200 words. And the reason that they did that is so they could be read at meetings, which they don't do anymore, but I said that. Most of the time I did say that. However, I will caution you, the full meaning of these traditions can be not gotten by strictly the short form. And you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. Like, look at tradition number 6 in the long form. When we get there, look at that, however many that is. Tradition 6 in the short form is pared down, and we're losing a lot of stuff. A lot of stuff. Not saying anything more than that. That's the history of it, and there is no judgment at all. So, what we want to do with this, obviously, in this thing called the 12 traditions, we'll go ahead, and tonight we are starting with the first tradition. I suppose that's how one is before two, and so on and so forth. So, we will go ahead and read the short form and listen to the difference. And I'm going to be the devil's advocate on the short form on this one. Our common welfare should come first. Personal recovery depends on AA unity. Sometimes people have a hard time with that. I'm going to go ahead and put it in a box that maybe we can all look at. Say, my common welfare should come first. Personal recovery depends on AA unity. Maybe I'll look at it that way. Do as you see fit. One thing I will caution you, though, listen to this, the long form. Our experience has taught us that. That's different right from the get-go. That's how all of these traditions start with that. And by the way, experience is the hardest teacher. The reason being is you take the test first, then you learn the lesson. Most of the time, the lesson we learn is painful. And that's how we all got here, is no pain, no gain. And that's what these traditions were hammered out painfully. People died. Groups died. Alcoholics died to give us what we have tonight. And not being melodramatic, whatever, it is what it is. It's factual. Groups were dying, people were dying, alcoholics were dying. Bill knew it, he saw it. We got this thing so twisted, we're talking about Alcoholics Anonymous, that groups were having membership rules, and I know it's the third tradition, we'll talk about it, but it just came to my mind. They did a survey. They said, all right, all you AA groups, send in your requirements to be members of AA. New York compiled them all together. And if all the rules of all the groups were enforced at one time, neither Dr. Bob nor Bill could have been a member of AA. That's how bad we got that thing screwed up. 9/10 of the members of Alcoholics Anonymous couldn't have been members of AA if we would have had all the rules and regs that these different groups had. Absolutely fascinating. So anyhow, the long form goes as this. Each member of Alcoholics Anonymous is but a small part of a great whole. AA must continue to live, or most of us will surely die. Hence, our common welfare comes first, but individual welfare follows close afterwards. You can see the difference between the short and the long form. I also like to start with something I deem the 12 spiritual principles of AA's 12 traditions. The 12 traditions are often referred as to why it works. They ensure the continuance of AA as a whole by providing guidelines for groups to evaluate their activities and actions. In a practical vein, they are, individually and collectively, humility builders for the group. They ask the group to consider its conduct from a broader perspective and, when necessary, give up something for the overall good of AA. The traditions contain spiritual principles. These principles, when applied in our lives, complement the 12 steps as a guide to personal recovery. Okay, obviously, these spiritual principles, the traditions, I strive to apply daily in my life. So the first one, the AA member conforms to the principles of recovery, at first because he must, later because he discovers a way of life he really wants to live. And it brings us to this U word, unity. Absolutely fascinating. So, before we go ahead and get started, we'll go, once again, these traditions were born out of trial and error. The only one that we didn't get from our own experience was Tradition 10. Milton Maxwell, a trustee, wrote a paper for Bill on the Washingtonians, and we will talk about that. And it's, if you get a chance to read that, do it. It will, it shook me to my knees, literally brought me to my knees, because the Washingtonian was a twin brother of Alcoholics Anonymous. In 8 years, they no longer existed. And if you want to find out about the Washingtonians, get in the history books, Google it, whatever. But it's absolutely, it's scary. What I'm trying to say is, in the grand scheme of things, Alcoholics Anonymous, we are not even an infant. We are a newborn. From 1935 to 2017, are you kidding me? My dad was older than this when he died. That ain't nothing in the scheme of time. Everybody thinks AA is going to be around forever. I got news for you. I don't know. You talk to some of the old timers, and I've sat at the feet of some of them, and I won't repeat. It was quite alarming on their take, and it scared me to death. So anyhow, so we don't get off on that. The 12 traditions are a distillation of AA experience. You might want to write that E word down. There's a lot of words. What we're going to be talking about, obviously, Bill wrote these, and these were articles in the Grapevine. We will talk about what the Grapevine is. And obviously, Bill was trying to sell the traditions. Thank God he did. In April of 46, he coined these, April of 46. The World War II had just ended, and here we are. 12 points of AA tradition to ensure our future. At 9 years of AA, the fellowship, in the April the 10th of 39, when the big book made it to print, Bill already knew that we could be in danger. How did he know that? Well, we know how he knew that. It's absolutely fascinating that he had that gift. Anyhow, we'll talk about that, and he obviously called them for 12 points of survival. He doesn't mix words. So anyhow, out of these 150 articles in this book, 29 of them are on the traditions, and they were written from 1945 to 48. Absolutely fascinating. We talked about Earl Treat, paring them down for that. Our history, real quick, how we got them. Bill and Lois traveled around the country trying to sell this. Bill was trying to peddle these traditions. He would go town to town, and he said, "Oh, Bill, we don't want to hear about that. We want to hear about your," they called it his bedtime story, and that's not what you think. It was his white flash at Towns Hospital. Nobody wanted to hear about that, but thank God he was like a pit bull. He knew that this had to be done, and obviously he went around and they just didn't want to hear him. One of our greatest things in our history, thank God, we need to talk about it, right here in Northeast Ohio. 1950, 28 miles from here. It's a place called Cleveland. Without Cleveland, AA wouldn't be who it is and what it is. First International Convention, 2,000 alcoholics. Dr. Bob was dying, gave his famous farewell talk. He gave us two gifts at that convention most people don't know about. The one that we're talking about, the traditions. He gave the blessing to that. Also, he gave Bill the okay to go with the conference, which is our third legacy, different story for a different day. But that was instrumental. Those were the two last gifts that Dr. Bob gave to us. But here's what's amazing about that. 2,000 alcoholics together, unanimity. And you might want to write that down too or get this book. By the way, I must have this book for all of Bill's writings, and you'll see tonight. Unanimity, 2,000 alcoholics, all of them said yes to the 12 traditions. I bet you can't go to a home group of 6 people and get unanimity on when the anniversary is and what kind of soft drink you're going to serve. 2,000 to 6. Joke about it, but it's absolutely serious. Do you know why in 1950 versus 2017 that may be? The level of desperation back then may have been in a little bit higher than it is now. Back then, it was the we, the us, and ours. Come back in January, and I'll point it out to you in the forward to the second edition. That recovery rate was 75%. Today, it's not even 5%. Coincidental, I'm sure it is, or not, but what I'm saying is that was one of the greatest turning points in the history of Alcoholics Anonymous, Cleveland First International, and that's what we're reading about. Absolutely fascinating. So, we're going to go ahead and get started here. I would like to, on this right here, and there's some people in here, who said the needs of many outweigh the wants of a few? Going once, going twice. Not conference approved, it was Spock on Star Trek. But that's the first tradition. And there's something too. Who's got some money on them? I think there's on it. E pluribus unum. You know what that stands for? You know, that's Latin. You know what that means? Out of many, one. Thank you. That's what we have. Are we talking the language of we, us, and ours, one? Or is it the splintering of me, my, and I? Our history is full of that, obviously. What we're bringing to Alcoholics Anonymous, and we'll talk about it, and like I said, I don't like to go to the big book too much, but every other sentence is that. He talks about this concept. In fact, we'll read it tonight, and that's part of the thing on the syllabus, as you'll see, about elements that bind us together. When we come to Alcoholics Anonymous, if we talk anything other than alcoholism, the recovery therefrom, that does not bind us together, it separates us. So what we're bringing to Alcoholics Anonymous, there is no gray area. Either it's binding us together or it's separating us. There is no gray area. So that's why in Alcoholics Anonymous, conference approved, Alcoholics Anonymous, and wait till you see what he talks about that. And it kind of reminds me about this real quick, and I don't know if you can see it. There's a cartoon tradition thing on there where the guy's sawing off the branch, but guess what? He's on the branch too. And so I'll show you, I'll kill me. We joke about it, but obviously it is so true. Bill said this too, and we were going to go ahead and get started. He says, without unity, I'll be damned. We're back again. I said that, yes. Without unity, the heart of AA would cease to beat. Our world arteries would no longer carry the life-giving grace of God. His gift to us would be spent aimlessly. You know what? God's given, I'll speak for myself, has given me a great gift. It's called Recovery in Alcoholics Anonymous. The precious gift of life. How dare I disrespect God one more time by disrespecting Alcoholics Anonymous? And obviously it's life-saving. We talk about that. So we will start with language of the heart. And if you don't have the covering on this, one last thought before we go ahead and start on the covering about the, yeah. Thanks for listening. I'm glad somebody's still awake. But anyhow, about the me, the me, my, and I, the we, us, and ours. Do with it as you will, but since it's there, and in our 12 steps that are listed in the famous chapter 5, how it works there, not in the narrative or the explanation, there are 15 we, us, or ours. Not a single me, my, or I in there. There are 11 we, us, or ours in the 12 traditions short form. There are 36 we, us, or ours in the 12 traditions. Not a single me, my, or I in any of the steps or any of the traditions, short or long form. So why, in God's name, in a home group meeting, would I say, well, I think, or no, it's not I, it's we. It's already gone before us. That's our experience. Our experience has taught us. Okay? So, for what it's worth, when I talked about the other book, the big book, in the foreword to the first edition, he uses the word we 18 times. We know that. April 10th, 39 came to print. He used the word we, 1955 second edition, 10 times. Forward to the third edition, he used the word we, well, Bill was dead, he didn't write this one, 0 times. Forward to the fourth edition, the word we is used once, but it don't count because they're quoting out of the first edition. Why have we gone from 18 to 10 to 0 to 0? I don't know. I'm sure it's purely coincidental. And by the way, you ever notice when we close with the Lord's Prayer, we say our Father and not my Father? It's our Father. Oh, that's different than my Father. Got it. Okay, so now we're done with the pleasantries. The language of the heart. If you don't have a book jacket, I will go ahead and read. I find the jackets are absolutely fascinating. It goes as this. In 1935, 2 drunks met and talked in the library of the home in Akron, Ohio. That would be the Cyberling Estate as the crow flies right up there. Please go in there. If you haven't been there, I will guarantee you will have a spiritual awakening, spiritual experience. The Spirit is in that house. The Spirit's everywhere, but you will feel the Spirit in there. Anyhow, it said from that single event was to grow a program of recovery, not drinking, for more than 2 million once hopeless alcoholics. How did the seeds that became Alcoholics Anonymous take root and develop? The articles in this book tell much of that story. So please do yourself a favor and read this whole book after we're done or before as we're going. That's absolutely important to have a grasp on it. In the Grapevine, AA's International Journal, co-founder Bill Wilson recorded and reflected on AA's history as it happened. A prolific writer, Bill authored nearly 150 Grapevine articles, and virtually all of them appear here, published for the first time in one volume. Thank God they put this book together. A man of rare energy and action, Bill committed his thoughts to paper with great faculty. Yet the principles he derived to unite and sustain this extraordinary fellowship were born of long and arduous process of trial and error. In the events and the insights he chronicled from AA's pioneer years, Sober alcoholics today can find answers to their own struggles and those of their groups. Timeless. That's what the cover says. Timeless. Okay. He goes on to say, covering a multiple topics from the basic principles of AA steps and traditions to a discussion of the personal search of many AA members for, quote, emotional sobriety. Bill's words hold the meaning for AA members of any age. Writing 10 years after his first visit to European AA with his wife Lois in 1950, Bill had this to say, quote, as we journeyed from land to land, we had the same magnificent adventure in kinship over and over again. Everywhere it was the same. The communication, remember we were talking about that, keep that word in handy, of heart to heart in wonder, in joy, and in everlasting gratitude. Lois and I knew that AA could circle the globe, and it has. It is the belief of the Grapevine editors that the fundamental AA experience expressed here will illuminate every facet of AA life, a way of life that has over the years helped one suffering alcoholic to communicate with another in, quote, the language of the heart. Ton of information just in the dust jacket. So, on the syllabus as we go, it says the book jacket, and then I want to make a point that the copyright of this book came out in 1988. That ain't that old. Thank God they did that. I happen to be working the third printing in 1990, and it's absolutely fascinating to see what your printing is and what the editions are, or see what year your printing is and what edition it is. And as most table of contents, there is method to the madness, and obviously we won't go through that as he did. However, we will explain why he did. And it's absolutely fascinating that we do that. I want to go to the foreword, and it's important for me to do that, and that is Roman numeral 11. I assume they're all the same. Is that where the foreword is? And the foreword was written by all people, his lovely wife, Lois, in debt of gratitude. She did so much for not only the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, but for the Al-Anon family groups. We owe her life, and I happened to be sober when she passed. In fact, there was a memorial service in this church. By the way, St. Paul's, by the way, is a historical, not this part of St. Paul's. It used to be downtown, but that's a story in itself, and time won't permit with that. But anyhow, it goes as this. Dear friends, as you may know, Bill wrote quite extensively for the Grapevine over many years. It was a way for him to share his experience, strength, and hope with the entire fellowship. I think it's wonderful that so much of this work will now be available again, especially for those countless AAs who have come into the fellowship since these articles were first published. I hope they will find them useful. Gratefully, Lois. So, if we can turn to the Roman numerals into introduction. Now, I will hesitate because obviously time doesn't permit. We will go to the highlights or low life, if you will. So when I read the first sentence, I'll let everybody get caught up where we're at. So introduction, Roman numeral 13. And we will start with the first sentence of that. So this is the history of this book. It's important that I have this information before I proceed. It goes on, publication of the language of the heart. Everybody's right with us, right? Brings together for the first time virtually every article written for the Grapevine for Bill W., co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's power in this book. That is power. You ain't going to find a book second to the textbook called Alcoholics Anonymous that's probably got that much power. There's a lot of power in this book. All right, next paragraph. In June 1944, everybody's there, right? He's going to give us the history of the Grapevine. Some of us don't know what the Grapevine. It goes, in June 1944, the Grapevine was established as a local newspaper through individual efforts of 6 New York City AAs who were concerned about what seemed to be a lack of understanding among groups in the metropolitan AA. How could that be? 1944, they weren't even up and going. There was already a misunderstanding. Come on, y'all, there are no new sins under the sun. History, it's happened, experience. I'll be damned, that could apply today in 2017. Okay, he goes on to say, who were concerned about lack of understanding among the groups in the metropolitan area. Mailed by the 6 editors to all known groups in the U.S. and Canada were sent free to AAs in World War II, armed forces. The Grapevine soon caught on nationally. In 1945, I voted the groups. It became the principal, that's P-A-L, by the way. We usually talk about principles, P-L-E. Principal Journal of the Fellowship as a whole, and since the January 1949 issue, it has been known as the International Journal of Alcoholics Anonymous. History of the Grapevine. How many people are getting the Grapevine? Okay. Maybe we'll have a Grapevine rep here, so that's a different story for a different day. Okay. At one time, that was the magazine of Alcoholics Anonymous. Okay, how about if we go down to the second to last sentence, and it says, in more than 150 articles. All right, we talked about that, but we're going to go ahead and do it again. In more than 150 articles, written over a span of 26 years, Bill documented the painstaking process of trial and error. I keep going back to that because it's so important. That resulted in AA spiritual principles of recovery, 12 steps, unity, 12 traditions, and service, 12 concepts. Absolutely fascinating. So see that triangle, all 3 sides are equal. That's the real deal. That's all recovery, total, body, mind, and soul. Obviously, in those articles, 29 and were written on the traditions from 45 to 48. We talked about that. Once again, we learn more by our mistakes than by our success. Okay? Unity, recovery, and service that articulated his vision for what the fellowship could become, not would. He's very conservative in a lot of the things that he writes. And he uses the exact word in the exact place to get what he was trying to say. Could. Very conservative. Kind of reminds me of Silkworth's Doctor's Opinion and what he wrote for that. Very humble and very conservative, but pointed and direct too. Roman numeral 14, next page. About the second or third in there where it says, the articles virtually fell into place. Everybody with me, right? The articles virtually fell into place. Now he's going to give us what these table of contents really mean and how they got there. They fell into place. They are arranged chronologically in 3 parts, according to the primary concerns Bill was thinking and writing about each period of time. They are further subdivided by major and minor subjects within each part. Absolutely fascinating. So here's the method to the madness. Brief introductions to parts 1, 2, and 3 outline the major events and trends in AA that impelled Bill to emphasize a particular aspect of AA life. In a few cases, an introductory sentence or 2 sets the context for a specific article. Toward the end appear a group of memorial articles. Last sentence it says, and of course an appendix containing 7 articles in which Bill reflected on the Grapevine itself. Next paragraph, second sentence, where it says his series of articles on traditions. You with me? Okay, his series of articles in the traditions were written in 1952-53, later reprinted in the book 12 Steps and 12 Traditions. We all know about that, right? And by the way, editorial comment, when he's writing on the steps, those are essays. Those are not directions on how to take the steps. We don't work them. These are the steps we took. Do not go to this book on directions how to do it. They are not in there. It's a great book. It's a good addition to the big book, but not a substitution for. That's why I love to go to, they call them 12 by 12. That's a piece of lumber. It's 12 and 12 because people can talk and dance around the steps when they're talking about them because they've never taken them, and they're talking about what it says in here. Absolutely fascinating. Go to one and see what I'm talking about, because the directions and the narrative on how, when, and why we take the steps are in the big book only. So that's good stuff. That's the history of it, and we'll refer to the 12 and 12 just a little bit. Brought it, obviously, not a prop, but it's important because we talked about it in the dictionary that we have. Okay, and it goes on to say, if we can, obviously, we talked about the 12 traditions, short form, 1947, 200 words, oral treat. Last paragraph explains how Bill writes. I think it's real important that I get a grasp on this. Listen to what it says. Since this collection is by itself, since this collection is by its nature and a historical document. Hold on. History. No debate. It is what it is. It happened. It's not a philosophy. It's not to be read into. It's to be studied and learned from. This is a historical document. Several characters should be mentioned. First, repetition. I'll be damned. Who didn't know that Bill did that? Yeah. Thank God he did, because I miss it even when he repeats it 3 times, 6 times, 9 times. Repetition. Beautiful thing. These articles appeared originally in a periodic publication, and Bill could have never sure that any reader had seen a previous one. Thus, he often repeated ideas or illustrations, and those repetitions may have been retained to assure the integrity of Bill's work. Second, some material may become outdated. Hold on before you get your undies out of a bunch here. For example, a few ideas that were articulated in the very early articles of the traditions proved unworkable in the light of later experience, but for the sake of historical accuracy, earlier versions have not been edited. We will see in some of these traditions, not too many, what he originally wrote did not pan out to what we have now. Stay tuned and you'll see what I'm talking about. Okay, and last, number 3, Bill was a man of his times, and some readers may find unfamiliar idioms. Uh-oh. What is an idiom? Not an idiot, idiom, okay, yeah. Okay, Webster's. An idiom is an expression whose meaning is not predictable from usual meanings. Kick the bucket. That would mean I would have a broken toe if it was plastic, if it was metal, whatever. We know the idiom for kick the bucket is you die. Bill loved to use those idioms. I need to know what an idiom is, okay? Terminology. What is terminology? Terms belonging to a particular, a science or art or a specialized subject, or nomenclature. Boy, you better believe I better know what an idiom is. I better know what terminology is. And last note he says, or maybe taken back by phraseology. What is that? It is a manner or style of verbally expression, characteristic language. I need to know what this book is. I need to know what an idiom is. I need to know what phraseology is. I need to know what terminology is, or if not, I'm going to miss it. I'll be damned too if it doesn't with this. Sometimes this book, I need this book for this book, because he tells me, you'll see what I'm talking about later. He gives me a definition in here, and I don't know what some of the words are in there. I thought they did. I thought I did, but I was wrong. And we know that Bill was the master of the English language. Using the right word and close to the right word are the difference between lightning and lightning bug. Real close in words, but guess what? There's a world of difference in the same thing. So I cannot assign what I think a definition of a word is, because I'll miss the point that he's trying to get on me. Okay, so he goes on to say, that would be considered inappropriate today. Once again, the original language has remained, because any tampering with phraseology might also be tampering with the meaning. Okay, Bill's last thoughts about the grapevine are in the last paragraph. Bill W.'s most quotable description of the grapevine appears in A.A. Comes of Age. It's another fascinating book, by the way. Quote, this is what Bill said. The grapevine is a mirror of the A.A. thought and action worldwide. It's a sort of magic carpet on which all of us can travel from one distant AA outpost to another. and has become a wonderful exchange medium of our current thought and experience. It is the hope of the Grapevine editors that Bill W.'s timeless insights, written in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, will serve as a mirror for A members in the 1980s and beyond, reminding us what it used to be like, documenting what happened and why it happened, history, and illuminating the present with the wisdom of AA's experience in the first 30 years. Absolutely fascinating. All right, next one, page 20 and 24, or 20 through 24. Now these things that we're talking about will come alive. Note this date, April of 1946. You know, that's older than most of us. Anybody past 46 in here? Not too many. Nobody admitted anyhow. It ain't me, so I can rub that in. Close, but not yet, right? Okay, listen to what he says. AA's suggested points of AA tradition. Nobody invented Alcoholics Anonymous. Isn't that cool? It grew. Trial and error, here we go again, has produced a rich experience. That E word. In other words, it happened. Little by little, we've been adopting the lessons. We talked about the test, taking the test, learning the lesson of that experience. E word again. First as policy and then as tradition. That process still goes on, and we hope it never stops. Should we ever harden too much, the letter might crush the spirit. Bill always talked about the spirit of the law and not the letter of the law. That's why we left the Oxford group and became Alcoholics Anonymous. Bill knew it. Alcoholics ain't going to go for no letter of the law. We ran from the law. We ain't going to run to it, right? Okay. And it says, we could victimize ourselves by petty rules and prohibitions, and we could imagine that we had said the last word. Next paragraph. Yet the lessons, usually ain't too pleasant, right? Of our experience. There he goes again. You know, Bill didn't like to repeat himself unless he had to. So that experience is $1 million word in this book. Count for a great deal, a very great deal, that we are convinced. The first written record of AA experience was the book Alcoholics Anonymous. So if anybody asks you what the big book is about, you just heard it from the author right there. It's the first book of our experience. I better know damn well what's in that big book, right? It's our textbook. That's what it is. It's our experience. In other words, once again, history. It's happened. It's undebatable. It's not a philosophy. It's not a theory. It's experience. It's history. Beautiful. Okay, so it goes on to say, it was addressed to the heart of our foremost problem, the release from alcohol. It contained, personal experiences of drinking and recovery, not drinking, recovery, and a statement of those divine but ancient principles which have brought us miraculous regeneration. Listen to what he just said, what the 12 steps are. It wasn't invented. They are ancient principles. Have brought us miraculous regeneration. Oh, that's right. That's what Silkworth talks about in the Doctor's Opinion. Recreating our life. That's what he talks about in the narrative of the third step. We are reborn. I'll be damned. Everything that he's saying in the big book, he's saying right here, miraculous, spiritual, ancient principles. Isn't that something? Regeneration. Okay. Then it goes on. 7 years of vast experience again with our next greatest undertaking, the problem of living and working together. My God, wait a minute. Now, when did he write that? 46. Oh. If we're living and working together, that would be a definition of unity. That is our greatest undertaking. Today that is our main concern. If we can succeed in this adventure and keep succeeding, then and only then will our future be secure. That's pretty powerful stuff. It's not an option. Only then will it be secure. Suppose that's why he called it, for points of tradition, for survival. Absolutely fascinating. Since personal calamity holds us in bondage no more, our most challenging concern has become the future of Alcoholics Anonymous. My God, he's writing this in 46. Are you kidding me? Okay. And it says, how to preserve among us AA such a powerful unity. Yes, that's what it is. It's not just unity, it's powerful. Damn him. Damn him. Damn him. I'm just kidding. Bless him, because now it's not unity, it's taking it to the next level. Powerful unity. Okay, so, powerful unity that neither weakness of persons nor the strain and strife of these troubled times can harm our common cause. Not mine, not yours, ours, okay? We know that Alcoholics Anonymous must, not should, not could, not ought to, continue to live, else save few exceptions, we and our fellow alcoholics through the world will surely resume the hopeless journey to oblivion. Pretty powerful warning. Unity, we survive. Disunited, we die. Oh, that's right, there was another one. Who said a house divided can't stand? Abraham Lincoln. We all know about that, right? Damn, did he know that in the Civil War? Yeah, that's our history. We're just talking about our history. He knew damn well on that. And here it is too, right here. He goes on to say, almost any AA can tell you what our group problems are. Fundamentally, they have to do with our relations with one another and the world outside. Here are the 3 levels we're talking about. You might want to write this down. These are what these traditions are. Fundamentally, they have to do with our relations one with another. That's with me and you. And, obviously, the world outside. They involve relations to the AA group, the relation to the group of Alcoholics Anonymous as a whole. 3 levels of relations. Me with you, my group to AA, and AA to society. That's how powerful these traditions are. 3 levels of relations. This is how we started. Remember I told you from relations and then he changed it to experience? That's what it's about. Personal experience, relations with you. I gotta be healthy with my relation with me and with Almighty God, and then I can have a relation with you. How important are these? Because then I can take it to a group, obviously. The group relates to AA, and hopefully AA relates to the world. How powerful is it? Remember, we're talking about recovery, and that's what this is about. Okay, so now he goes on to say, this involves relation to AA, the group, the world relation to Alcoholics Anonymous as a whole, the place of Alcoholics Anonymous, that troubled seed called modern society, where all humankind must presently shipwreck or find haven. Then you have a great way of doing that. Who wants to be shipwrecked? Okay. Terribly relevant is the problem of our basic structure, our attitude towards those ever-pressing questions of leadership, money, and authority. The future may well depend on how we feel or act about things that are controversial and how we regard our public relations. Our final destiny. Whoa-oh. Oh, he's really laying it down now. Our final destiny, and by the way, that is predetermined. It's obviously inevitable. And it's the power who makes that destiny. We know in that other book, in 164, page 164, it talks about our destiny. God's destiny, he's, remember, the one pulling the strings, okay? So obviously, and it says, which will surely hang on what we presently decide to do with these danger-fraught issues. What is a fraught? It's filled, full of, or laden. So now he's telling us what it is. So the 12 traditions, our public relations policy. The first 10 focus on our internal working, our relations with ourselves and within the fellowship. The last 2 traditions focus on our position or relations with the world outside. Absolutely fascinating when I look at the traditions in that sense. Okay, so now he goes on, obviously on page 22. In the beginning, on the top page, it says, I shall venture to place into words these suggestions. Not directions, not laws, whatever, suggestions, okay? For Alcoholics Anonymous, traditions of relations. See, that's what he originally wanted to do it, and we changed it to the experience. It goes 12 points to assure our future. Our AA experience has taught us that. And then he lists the long forms of the traditions. Absolutely fascinating. Tradition 1 on page 76 and 77. Tradition 1, page 76. Look at the date on this. December 1947. Isn't it cool how he interrelates the traditions with the steps? Can't talk with one without talking another. Our whole AA program. Stop there. Wait a minute. Our whole. Not some of it, not most of it, not a lot of it, not quite a bit. Our whole AA program, which is the 12 steps, by the way, is securely founded on the principle of humility. Uh-oh, I told you about that word. That is to say, perspective. Whose perspective? Not mine. Yeah, that's for sure. Not yours. It's ours. It's really God's. Okay, and it says, we relate ourselves rightly to God, humility, to our fellows, humility, that we see each other as we really are, quote, a small part of a great whole. Seeing our fellows thus, we shall enjoy group harmony. That is why AA's tradition can confidently state, quote, our common welfare comes first. Okay, obviously, it goes on. Does that mean we shall ask AA individual doesn't count too much? It be swallowed up, dominated by the group? No, it doesn't work that way. Perhaps there's no society on earth more solicitous. What is that? That's concerned, eager, careful, particular. Yeah, he used the right word. Of personal welfare, more careful to grant the individual with the greatest possible liberty of belief and action. Alcoholics Anonymous has no must. The fellowship doesn't, but the big book's got a whole lot of them in there. Okay? Skip the next sentence. It says, we do suggest, but we don't discipline. You know why there's no discipline in Alcoholics Anonymous? You know why there's no AA police? Even though some think there are, and, the badge. And by the way, I do have some meeting infractions I will write your ass a ticket. Did I say that? Yeah, okay. No, I won't. Some will, but they might hit you over the head. Do you know why? And we're jumping ahead. That's tradition 2. There's 2 powers that are more powerful than anything in Alcoholics Anonymous. One of them's alcohol, saying, if you drink, I'm going to kill you. We all know that power. The other one more powerful than that is God. God's saying, I'm waiting for you to do my will, and if you do, then I'll save you. What more powers do you need to deal with in those 2? That's why these aren't laws, they aren't ethics or whatever. You can have anything in Alcoholics Anonymous. You can do anything in Alcoholics Anonymous. And including the last thing, you can even take a drink anytime you want. Have at it. That's what we're all about. Remember? In other words, you can have anything in AA. Anything. A girlfriend, a mistress, 2 cars, motorcycle, $1 million, house on the hill. Whatever you want. Boyfriends, girlfriends, whatever your deal is. I guarantee you there's a price to pay for it. Nothing comes free. You'll always pay for what you get. You always get what you pay for, but you will pay for what you get. Careful what you ask for, too. And this is what he's talking about on there. That's why we have that. So, and it says, and skip the next sentence, we do suggest, but we don't discipline. Instead, compliance or non-compliance with any principle of AA is a matter for the conscience of the individual. He is the judge of his own conduct. Beautiful. Second and last paragraph, next page on page 177. So we learn in the matters that deeply affect the group as a whole, our common welfare comes first. Rebellion ceases and cooperation begins because it must, not should, could, ought to. We have disciplined ourselves. Eventually, of course, we cooperate because we really wish to. We see without substantial, another substantial what? Unity. Remember this? We're going to abbreviate it. Substantial unity, powerful unity. Not just unity. It gives us a lot of different levels of unity. Levels and layers of unity, okay? Without substantial unity, there can be no AA. And without AA, there can be little lasting recovery for anyone. I surrender. I really get it now. We're only just in the beginning of this. Together, we stand. Divided, we fall. Together, we stay sober. By myself, I'm dead drunk and I'm dead. There's no guesswork in this at all. Okay? And it goes on to say, we gladly set aside personal ambitions whenever these might harm AA. We humbly, damn him, confess that we are but a small part of the great whole. Now, I think we're getting that. So, now, individual to group, page 32. Isn't this a great way to read this book, Alcoholic, jumping back and forth and maybe skipping in? I love it. It's because time. That's how God do it. You know, you like this one. It's the first paragraph only. So, look at the date on this. July of 46. Okay. And it skipped the first sentence. It says, the first of our 12 points of AA tradition states, each member of Alcoholics Anonymous is but a small part of the great whole. AA must continue to live or most of us will surely die. I get it. Hence, our common welfare comes first, but individual welfare follows close afterwards. Obviously, long form of the first tradition. Listen to what he says. This is a recognition common in all forms of society. Not some, not most, not a lot, not quite a few. When Bill uses those words, there is no guesswork. All forms of society. Okay, I get it. That the individual must, not should, not could, not ought to, must sometimes place the welfare of his fellows ahead of his own controlled desires. Were the individual to yield nothing to the common welfare, there would be no society at all. So that's the mitigating, that's the driving factor. We're forced to be unselfish. Yeah. Okay. Only self will run riot, anarchy in the worst sense of the word. It says world, that was a Freudian slip. So now we're done with that. Okay. Now, obviously, see about on page 93 and 94. Second paragraph, and this is a quick one where it says, at a glance, the 12 traditions. We got it on 93. At a glance, at the 12 traditions will instantly assure anyone that giving up, surrender, is the essential idea of them all. Not some, not most, not a lot, not quite a few. Beautiful, giving up. Who doesn't need to surrender? We were texting that earlier this morning. Sure glad I ain't running this damn show. And you are even gladder than me, let me tell you that, right? Okay. Giving up, okay, is the essential idea of them all. In each tradition, the individual or the group is asked to give up something for our general welfare. Tradition 1 asks us to place the common good ahead of personal desire. Anybody getting a little nauseous about this now? Yeah. Isn't that beautiful? Isn't that beautiful? Okay. On page 94. Where it says the 12 points of tradition. We talked about this, but we're going to go ahead and do it. The 12 points of tradition are little else than specific application of the spirit of the 12 steps of recovery to our group life and to our relations with society in general. So if anybody asks you what the 12 traditions are, there you go! Page 94. That's the answer, not my answer. Conference approved, the guy who wrote them. No guesswork on what they are now, right? Okay? All right? And it says, the recovery steps would make individual AA whole with one and one with God. Anybody ask you what the 12 steps are? Just gave you that answer too. How powerful is that? Okay? Like I said, the 12 points of tradition would make us one with each other and whole with the world about us. Unity is our aim. Our AA traditions are, we trust, securely anchored in those wise precepts. What is a precept, by the way? It is a commandment or direction given as a rule of action or conduct. Holy moly, man. It's an injunction as to moral conduct or a maxim. Remember when I told you this dictionary gave me a definition, then I had to look up what the word maxim is. You do it yourself, okay? And then it goes on to say, it is a procedural directive or rule or a lot. That's what precept. And here are the precepts they are. Charity, gratitude, and that H word, and humility. Nor have we forgotten prudence, and that isn't a bad word. Bill was so into that, he cautioned us in the 12 concepts about the word prudence. Instead of, the all or nothing prudence. It's a novel concept. It's a point of the C word, not communication that we talked about earlier, a word called compromise. Man, yeah, you might have to torture now to do that, but anyhow. It says, may these virtues ever stand clear before us in our meditations. May Alcoholics Anonymous serve God, not you, not me, serve God in happy unity, for as long as He may need us. Remember, He always brings us back to the unflattering point of departure. This is God's deal. Not yours, not mine. It's ours, but God is the architect on that. That's a beautiful thing. Okay. Tradition 1, page 317. And this is a quickie too. And I can feel we're getting here. Take tradition 1. That would be about the third paragraph. Page 317, take tradition 1. It says that AA's common welfare comes first. That really means that our personal ambitions will have to be set aside. Not should, not ought to, but have to. Every time. Not some, not most, not a lot, not quite a few. A lot of power in that sentence. Every time that conflict with the safety or the effectiveness of our fellowship. It means that we must, not should, not could, not ought. God would grant us humble unity when we follow AA's traditions. A little tongue-in-cheek, but there's a serious thing on there.